Hello, my name is Ezenwa Ongbenu, and the topic of this discussion is to die and yet live. Now, this discussion is on psychological freedom and what I believe to be the absolute importance of living life with absolute psychological freedom. Now, in my understanding, this freedom proceeds from the death of psychological self. Now, I believe a good starting off point in the exploration of this is, what does it mean to die? Now, it goes without saying, death is the ending of the body and the mind. And they are intertwined because the mind is a product of the neural architecture in the brain that is housed in the body. So the two go together. And we recognize that death is very near to us, right? Because our proximity to death is quite incredible, right? Because nobody quite knows. Because death is one of those things. It's like, bam, take it. What do you mean? Who are you? And all those things that we held dear, that we were working on, that we hoped for, that we believed in, that we were expecting, or that we were sorrowful about, all that stuff just ends. So death is a very, very, very sharp tool in the ending of all these psychological processes, right? It's the termination of the field of thought. Now, with that being said, in many religious traditions, both in the East and in the West, there is also a dichotomy between the perishable quality of man, so the body and the mind, and then an eternal quality. So, for example, in the West, this is called the soul, and in the East, it's called by various other names. But a generalized term for this phenomenon should be something like the eternal energetic form. And the logic of the eternal energetic form varies in the various religious traditions. But briefly, notice that religion posits to be a theory of everything, right? Religion is the explanation of what was, what is, and is to come, and all things in between, right? It is a source of certainty, because once you believe and you buy into religion, then you have your theory of everything, literally. Now, in Eastern traditions, the eternal energetic form tends to be subject to a process known as reincarnation, where you die on the earth and then you come back in the earth, you die on the earth, you come back, in a cycle of death and rebirth. So this eternal energetic form is recycled. Now, it's not always, you don't always come back as a human being, right? So for example, the life form or the being, this eternal energetic form or life quality, can come as a bacterium, then a cockroach, then a mouse, then a deer, and then a human being. So there is a cause and effect relationship in this progression. If you do well in each state, if you obey some set of rules, or you behave in an appropriate manner, then you advance. And the human being is the most evolved and sophisticated being, physical being in this hierarchy. Now, as the human being, when you realize yourself, when the human being attains self-realization, that is when the human being is basically in direct contact with reality. That is, when the human being is liberated from the process of illusion, then that process of death and rebirth tends to end, and then you are just one with the existence. Now, in the Abrahamic traditions, the eternal energetic form, the logic is radically different, because this eternal energetic form comes once, dies once, and then faces judgment by a God that has likes and dislikes, and the being knows, the human being should know the likes and dislikes of his God during life, because it's in the sacred books. And now, how effectively you basically toe the party line during life, how obedient you were to the will of this God. When you now die, you now face judgment and you go to eternal heaven or eternal hell. And that is the full story. Now, there's a lot of diversity within the Abrahamic faiths, right? Because heaven is various things. In some of them, you wear a star headgear. In some of them, I think you sleep with multiple virgins for all eternity. And then hell varies as well. In some Abrahamic traditions, there is an intermediate phase called purgatory. In some, you are just annihilated. In some, you're suffering in this deep dark hole, burning for all time. Now, with all this being said, I believe that there is a contradiction in the eternal energetic form not saying anything about its reality or unreality, but I think there is a contradiction in it being comprehensible to man. This is what I mean. There is a contradiction in man comprehending the soul and its operation and its outcome. And this is what I mean, because the human mind operates in the field of thought and in the field of time. Now, the soul is eternal, and eternity by definition means outside time. So time has no meaning in eternity, because eternity is the cessation or the end, the annihilation, the destruction of time. Because there is no before, there is no now, and there is no after in the context of eternity. Eternity is the ever-present now. There is only the here and now in eternity. And there is no forward progression. But notice, human consciousness, and in this human consciousness is where religion obtains, is where the soul obtains, and all these other goodies. It's a forward progression. The human experience of time is a forward progression. There is a yesterday, there is a today, and there is a tomorrow. Even present in this talk, I'm experiencing it. I initially started off talking about something, but now I'm here where I am, and I'm still going to talk about more stuff. So there is a forward progression, and that is the operation of human consciousness, and it's inescapable. We cannot escape that forward progression as long as we're in the field of thought. Now, if we're able to step outside of our mind, perhaps in very deep meditation, then we would notice that time does not really exist. At least our experience of time that is no longer that forward progression. So in eternity, that forward progression is the illusion. But notice, the soul, in being comprehensible to man, is now in the field of time, because it's in the field of thought, and it is comprehensible to man to know its operation, its dialectic, its cause and effect. Behave well now, and this is what will happen to this eternal quality. So to me, that appears like a contradiction. Now, whether that is just semantic to some people, just wordplay, or just, philosophical mumbo-jumbo, but I think if one reflects on it closely, you will find out that anything that is eternal, be it the soul or the God, is impenetrable and is not accessible to human logic, because human logic is subject to the illusionary process of the forward progression. It's only an intelligence that operates outside that forward progression that can really understand either a soul or a God, and that is beyond the scope of human comprehension. Now, with that being said, returning to the notion of psychological freedom, which is of absolute importance, this proceeds from the death of me, the ending of me. And what is me? Our experience of me is an accumulative process. It's our beliefs, it's our traditions, it's our prejudices, it's our education, it's our certifications, it's our ambitions, it's our hopes, it's our dreams, it's our fears, it's our likes, it's our dislikes. It's all these things that we have been socially conditioned and acquired and internalized and programmed and have given life. Notice that the psychological process is not reality. And me is a psychological process. Notice that me is neither this body. Me exists. not in the physical plane. What we experience of ourselves as me is not in the physical plane. It's in the field of thought. And now, if we recognize that this concept of me is in the field of thought, and we understand the limitations of the field of thought, then we can also see that we can detach ourselves. Because when we say psychological death, it's not really the end of thought, because as a human being you have to think. In giving you this talk, I'm thinking, and I'm thinking pretty hard, you know. So thought is inescapable, but it's your relationship to thought that really matters. Because it's when you realize that it is not the fundamental reality. Truth is what is. Truth is what is out there. And what is out there is really unknowable, because we understand that what we see is a process in the brain, right? Roughly, vision is the harvesting of a little fraction of the energetic field that is now conducted to the brain, where the neural architecture makes colors, shapes, and forms. So the world of colors, shapes, and forms is in the field of thought and not out there. When we recognize the illusion of a lot of these things, then we are closer to where we can experience what is and be closer to experiencing true psychological freedom. Now, here's what I mean. Because the me is what we are severely invested in. And it is the me that also necessitates a soul, because it is so painful to think that, oh, after all my education, after all my doings, running about, making a living, acquiring this, climbing the social ladder, becoming somebody, that somebody is still me, but after doing all of that, there's nothing. No. So notice that in a way, fear necessitates the soul, and the problem of uncertainty also necessitates the soul. Because we're like, in this life, you see there's so much uncertainty. Man, you're married today, you're divorced tomorrow. You have a job today, you're unemployed tomorrow. You're rich today, you're broke tomorrow. You're poor tomorrow, you're poor today, you're rich tomorrow. So there's uncertainty in everything. You're healthy, you're sick. You're sick, you become healthy again. So uncertainty is in everything. So we have to have something that gives us that certainty, whether it's real or not. So notice, it's a very important psychological crutch, but it's also a limitation, and it's also a form of imprisonment. So freedom proceeds from understanding the illusion of this being somebody, arriving, you know, climbing the social ladder. And this process that could be a source of pleasure, you know, becoming somebody, is also a great source of sorrow as well. Because at times you find out that you're a nobody. You're just this little petty guy, this cog in this vast machine, you know. So with that being said, a useful approach is to understand that the me is an accumulative process. So the me involves my memories as well. Who I was, the things that I did. Now, if we recognize that the past does not really exist, and we are able to die to that past. Now notice, we need memory. Because if I didn't have memory, I wouldn't have known where I kept this camera, and I wouldn't be able to locate it. I'll just be, man, you know, I'm just here. Just here. Just here. So you need memory to be able to navigate and to do things. But it's how you relate to it. So it's when you recognize that the past is dead and gone, and it doesn't exist in any real sense, you know. So you have that degree of separation. I think is that how you relate to your thought process, how you relate to the past is the principal thing. And when you also recognize the proximity of death, because death is going to do all these things for you anyway. Because notice, in death, there is no more what I want to do, what I am, who you are. Oh, let me impress this person. Oh, let me try to be this. You know, all that stuff all just goes away. Now I want to say something briefly about this pleasure and pain dynamic, because in absolute freedom there is also the ending of a lot of things that used to give us pleasure, and also the ending of a lot of things that give us pain. So notice, this is not some, very pleasurable thing. Oh, you're going to be so blissful, you're going to be so happy. No, that's not really what proceeds from all of this. It's I don't really know how to describe it, because this is also outside my own field of experience. So this is what I'll call this an intimation. This is what I think. So that could also be problematic. But here's what I mean. In the me, there also comes a kind of superiority complex. Because in the me, there's a hierarchy, right? Because in society, we buy into the notion that there are hierarchies. There are people high up there, there are people low down here. And in that hierarchy, we are somewhere. And being somewhere in that hierarchy gives us pleasure, because necessarily there's somebody below us. And we're looking down. Oh, look at you, small man. And me, I'm up here. Look at my job. Look at my income. Look at my wife. Look at this handbag. Look at this handbag. Looking so sweet and nice. And I know you wanted that. And it gives me pleasure. Now, notice that we are somewhere in that hierarchy, but in most of our hierarchies we don't exist in the absolute top. So, okay, some people might create that in their own hierarchy because it's your own hierarchy, but in most hierarchies we exist somewhere. So notice that the counterpart of that superiority is also an inferiority, because you're going to meet somebody that is higher than you, and then you're going to be cowering. Oh my goodness, oh, look at his handbag. That handbag is better than my handbag, and then look at his job, look at his income. Oh, look at his erudition, look at how well he speaks, look at his swagger, look at his prestige. He's so elite. Look at that ride, look at that house. So there's all this stuff. And that is the thing, the pleasure, the pain, dichotomy, that duality. All these things are illusionary. And death is the end of all those things. So it behooves man to recognize that all these things are going to end. So why not, while alive, put an end to all those processes? And then have access to what actually is. Because when all these processes are no longer your reality, and you see beyond all those things, then you see what is, and then you experience things in a very different way. Now, practically, if somebody told you that you only had 1 hour to live, many people will do different things. But I think something that will happen is the intensity with which you experience life. You would definitely, okay, so you might want to make peace. Everybody that you had problems with, hey, forgive me, I'm so sorry, don't worry, we're cool. The conversations that you have, you'll be so much more attentive. Really? What? Are you serious? Oh my goodness. Because you know that this is the last conversation. The food that you eat, how intensely you will experience all those things. And what prevents us from, experiencing life with that intensity is because we buy into the me, and the me, we tend to believe that is enduring. We don't realize the proximity of the death of me and the inevitability of the death of me. If you realize that this me is going to die very quickly, very soon, because death is just right here, boom, and it's gone. So if we understand the closeness of death, then we also have to live life very differently. Now, I think many of us are afraid of dying just because, we're not truly living, because, we're in this thing and we're so held on to me. Because if we just let go of the me, then you see that there is not really too much to be afraid of about dying, because, okay, the physical pain of death may be depending on how you die, but, the other things that are so painful about death, oh, my friends, oh, my house, my property, my cars, oh, God, my prestige, all those things will not matter so much anymore, So, and practically, I think a way to, to initiate some of these processes you know, where you start to understand your own thought process, and you know, and then you give the necessary cubicle to your thought process is through, you know, meditation. That's where you know, you reflect on your own thought process. And it doesn't necessarily have to mean sitting cross-legged, you know, in some posture with all your chakras. No, it's just you know, being aware of your thought process and understanding it's illusionary. You know, it's a dream machine. So I hope you found this talk useful. Thank you so much for your time.